Welcome to Beyond the Brink and Fighting Back. I'm your podcast host, Rosemary Armao, and even as I'm speaking, I realize that I might be plagiarizing Stephen Colbert. That's how he opens his show. But oh well, he may be off the air soon. That's part of what we're going to be talking about, I suspect, in this chapter. My guest is Lucy Dalglish, who is a standout star in American journalism. Lucy has earned reputations that note that plural as a reporter, as a media lawyer, as executive director for a dozen years of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, and then as an educator. She was the dean of the journalism school at the University of Maryland for 11 years, starting in 2012, and she still teaches there. It's going to take you half an hour to read her full bio in our written material. It's full of honors and awards. But just know this going into our conversation. Lucy is an expert on journalism ethics and First Amendment issues. And there have been a few of those issues in the news recently. Lucy, I understand that you've spent the past few weeks busily revising some lessons for students on the First Amendment.
I can't keep up. You try to reuse, there's some standby case law that you want to make sure they use, but the examples just keep getting a little crazier and crazier. And one thing that I plan to make sure that tomorrow my classes understand is while everything is sort of a moving target and there's all these things going on, largely related to the administration of Donald Trump, the law hasn't changed, and that they still have free speech rights, and that these students these days tend to be a little bit reticent, and I'd like to see more of them trying to exercise those rights.
Yeah, that's a good point. I find the same in my classes. And let's start with that. You told me that you want to emphasize to students what the law is, not what some people are interpreting it as these days. So can we start with this? I don't know, there's a million entry points into this topic, but let's start here. Is there a difference between hate speech and hateful, vile speech? And is either or both protected by the First Amendment?
Both are protected by the First Amendment. Hateful speech, vile speech, hate speech. Nobody really has ever been able to really define what hate speech is. And, really, there are certain categories of speech that can be punished. Defamation, true obscenity, and threats. Basically, what I try to tell my students is that when somebody tries to shut you down for speech, that largely on a campus, you have to be harassing someone or threatening someone. Just being mean is not going to cut it when it comes to censorship of speech and pure classic speech.
Okay, so now we come, of course, to Jimmy Kimmel. He was mean, in the view of many, to Charlie Kirk, who is unfortunately, terribly, tragically assassinated. But he was not a good person in the view of many. Jimmy Kimmel didn't say anything outrageous when I read it, but I have a bias too. So were you surprised by the outcry? And more importantly, what did you think of the response by the networks?
Whoa, so much to unpack there.
I know.
First of all, censorship is when the government does something to shut you down. It's not when your employer shuts you down or when your customers try to shut you down. It's when the government tries to shut you down. This past couple of weeks have been so strange because people are saying, well, the government didn't try to shut down Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, well, the government, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission guy said, Brendan Carr said, well, just wait, we're going to get him. But actually, it's hard to just point the finger in one direction as far as what happened to Kimmel. He said something. Some of the more conservative station owners who have a lot of power, particularly now that so few companies own so many stations, They got angry and put pressure. We don't really know what was going on at Disney before they spoke up. It could be that the folks at Disney were equally outraged or concerned or frightened or something. But there were at least three distinct forces going on here. There was the folks at Disney who had the absolute right to remove him from the air. They are his employer, or his, the network that purchases his show is probably more accurate to say. But they control the network. You had the owners of the affiliate stations who can't directly shut him up, but what they can say is, ABC, you put that guy on the air again, we're just not going to take your feed. Go lump it. So ABC is being put under pressure by the local affiliates. I think it was Nextel and Sinclair.
It is.
Nexstar and Sinclair. And then there was the government. At the very least, ironically, Commissioner Carr was on the record about a year ago advocating for free speech and saying all these wonderful things about free speech. And then now he kind of flips, or at least it looked to me like he flipped, and said, well, we're going to teach those people a lesson. And just you wait. And of course, then the president kind of comes in and says, yeah, what that guy said. Yeah, let's go get him. And he amplified it.
And worse, now he's saying Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon have to go too.
Yeah. I was actually encouraged by what Disney did today. I don't know if what they said is what they were thinking a week ago. In other words, we were trying to get things to calm down. That may be the truth. I don't know. But there's no question that what he said on the air did inflame some people. And I didn't see it live. I only saw it recorded.
Same. Which is part of the problem with the Kimmel show. Too many of us are watching clips and not the whole show. And so, and the same, it's similar to what happened with Stephen Colbert earlier, also has rating problems, also was fired by a private entity that has no constitutional obligation not to fire him if they don't like what he says. But it is complicated by Trump being after him and Carr and pressure. Pressure applied by the government. And then on top of all of this, there's the collusion between the corporate entities that own the media and the government that controls their licenses, that allows them to make mergers, that allow them to do business, which is a direct pressure.
Yeah, there have been many, too many examples recently where the private industry, the private businesses that control corporate media have been trying to do deals. And in the broadcast world, broadcast still exists, and broadcast, not cable, but broadcast is regulated by the government. And when one entity wants to buy another in the broadcast world, you have to get the government to approve it. So there's an incredible hammer that they're holding over the owners who want to sell their property, their network, whatever. I'm trying to think, who was it? Oh, it was Senator Ted Cruz.
Oddly enough, yes.
Oddly enough, it was Senator Cruz. What's the name of the movie? I can't remember it. It basically said this is sort of a mafia move, a mafia-like threat. And there are some things that have happened recently that you could say, yeah, I can see that.
Well, we could talk about, they're not specifically press or entertainment. They're strictly government ones. There have been, there's a journalist from El Salvador who was arrested at a demonstration and then held for deportation, even though he entered illegally, has been going through the process to get a green card. He's now being sent back because his reporting was not cheerful Trump news. And then there's the student from Colombia who was part of the Palestinian protests, another thing that the Trump administration does not want to hear criticism about. And the government is bending over backwards to deport that guy. He's married to an American. He has an American citizen as a child, and they're still trying to send him. I guess now they want to send him to Uganda. Now, isn't that related to what we're seeing? It's in fact more dire than the situation
Well,
with Kimmel
well,
and
it,
Colbert.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there on the international front as well. I mean, right now I have a class with 14 students, really outstanding. Most of them had been professional journalists, but now they're getting master's degrees, and 4 of them are from, they're international. And I just keep thinking, I hope I can keep them for the rest of the semester. My TA last year was from China. I've got wonderful, wonderful graduate students, and I really worry about them. Last spring semester, when all of this really got started, we gathered our student journalists together who were international students and just said, look, if something happens, we really can't protect you. And just be careful. Be very, very careful. And we know you came here because we're different than everybody else. There's free speech in this country. But we just said, be very careful, particularly on social media.
Yeah.
And I can't believe I'm saying that. I mean, I've worked on free speech issues and the First Amendment issues for, oh my goodness, Rosemary, how long have I known you? 30 some years, right?
Exactly.
And I just can't believe we are where we are. But one thing the international students do have fewer rights than we do. And they are really, they're really in danger, I think. The American journalists, I don't worry as much about them. Because the law is still holding. We still have those, we still have New York Times versus Sullivan. We still have Brandenburg versus Ohio. We still, have those protections that say you have to show actual malice if you're going to prove that as a public official that you were libeled. Brandenburg says that there has to be incitement to imminent lawless action. We still have the law, and thus far, I think the federal judges in particular have been doing as much as they can to make sure the law is observed.
Okay, can I push back on this a little because
Yeah.
this is the topic I want to talk about. We have the law, and the judges at the district and the appeals level have definitely been stopping Trump. I guess the rate is like 70% of his efforts failed. But then they go to the Supreme Court, which is a supermajority of conservatives and pro-MAGA people. They are not happy with the press. At least 2 of them, perhaps 3, have said that they want to look at one of those cases you just cited, which is New York Times versus Sullivan, which gives reporters the right really to make mistakes without being called into question in the law. So we then have Donald Trump, who's filed a rather sizable lawsuit against the New York Times this past week also. Is that an attempt to get around the law?
Do I think that?
I know.
Do I think he filed a $15 billion lawsuit against the New York Times because his feelings were hurt? And he did it in Florida because he thought he'd probably get more support down there. And it was, 85 pages? And the judge, without the New York Times having to even file anything on his own, just said, hey, they said you can't. This is just
you can't
improper.
have a public tantrum in a lawsuit.
You can't have a that's a good way to put it. You can't have a public tantrum. And you're
However,
wasting our time.
however, he left it open that they can
Oh,
reframe
yeah.
it and gave them a date. They can reframe it and go
Yep.
back. And
Yep.
yes, a lot of lawyers that I've talked to are saying just as you have it, see it was just a stunt. But Donald Trump is pretty good at this stuff, and I think he did it deliberately. I posit that he filed this big suit and made a big giant case out of it, got a lot of publicity, and now it will be refashioned and it will move forward. I need to remind our listeners that we are talking with Lucy Dalglish, who is a former reporter and a lawyer and a law school, sorry, journalism school dean and an expert on the First Amendment. We're talking about free speech and free press. So what do you think? You just think the whole thing was just a Donald Trump political stunt?
Well, I think that he will continue the lawsuit. He will file it again. It will probably be pretty stripped down and respectful of the court. I mean, if you read that thing, which I did,
Crazy. Yeah.
it was crazy, raving lunatic time. And it was so,
Yep.
one thing, when you go to law school and you practice law, you learn how to be respectful and how to make a point. And there are rules that you're supposed to follow. And this thing was just so far beyond the pale. And yes, is he going to refile it? I'm sure he is. But keep in mind that when cases like this get going, a libel suit like this can take years and years and years.
I'm hoping that happens. I was worried about the Sarah Palin case, and that went far and was brought back again. And I thought sure that was an attempt to go after New York Times versus Sullivan. She's just such a horrible witness on the stand, though. She blew it, but and this I really worry, and maybe it's because I of my own prejudices, but I worry that he did this first as a stunt because we're all quoting from that crazy rant, and then it'll come back with the real lawsuit that he'll pursue. And that might be well received in the Supreme Court. I don't think he even cares about what the district and appeals court judges say anymore.
I
Possible?
think I think you're probably right. And he's got so much litigation. Look, I have this theory, and I told my students last week. Um, look, he's systematically going after news organizations. He's picking them off one by one. There's ABC. There was CBS, and ABC again, and then perhaps those commercial entities, they can kind of in many ways take care of themselves. One of the things that horrifies me more than anything is the way he went after public television and radio and Voice of America, Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe. To me, that is horrifying.
Yep.
And the influence, the soft power influence that the US had internationally because of those broadcast entities, I don't understand why you would give that up. He could flip it and use it. And I don't know why you would. I've thought about this a lot. I don't know why you would give it up. Now, PBS, NPR, and he keeps saying we're going to take their broadcast licenses away. Well, guess what? NPR and PBS, they don't have licenses. They are content providers to the people who do have licenses. And the people who do have licenses, they can be WETA here, they can be WAMU in the Washington area, WNYC, all those folks. The people who are not getting information are the ones out in Wyoming and Utah and North Dakota who have these public broadcasting stations that are being defunded. And those are communities that are not going to have access to prompt information. And guess what? Those folks who are in isolated areas, if we have a major national disaster, we rely on those people to reach our citizens. I mean, this whole thing, it kind of makes my head explode.
It is. And here's one more little factor on this whole mess. The internet was supposed to be the open channel. Anybody could talk, free access. And now look at who is owning the platforms, aside from big tech who have cozied up to Trump. We're now hearing that TikTok is going to end up in the hands of Google owners, and he wants to put, Trump is saying that he wants to put Murdoch, or at least the son of Murdoch, into the board, the advisory board. The government would have friends on the board of this platform. We talked a little bit about corporate censorship. Are we seeing a problem here with favoritism plus censorship?
Oh, absolutely. And to a certain degree, there's always been favoritism every time you have a new administration. Some people are in, some people are out, but this is just so excessive. To me, the most chilling visual at the inauguration was all of the platform owners, the Bezos, Zuckerberg, and sitting up there. Some of them looked like a deer in headlights most of the time, and a lot of people don't really think about what those companies are. Well, what they are is information providers, more than anything. You can do some commerce, and you can, do TikTok with your friends and all of that stuff. But really what they are is they control communication around the world, much more so than the press lords of, years gone by and the broadcast networks. And they are so overly complicated, it's hard to even explain what all of the potential dangers are. But I do know that over the last several weeks, my family communicates by text and by Facebook, and we have family members all over the world. So we're pretty much out there. So I'm actually on Facebook quite a bit, mostly to see where my family and friends are. And I increasingly go in and I find a posting from somebody who I believe sometimes they are really respected journalists. And I have to go in and go, is this true or is this false? Mm-hmm. And I'm finding myself on almost routine stories doing my own fact checking before I even start to consider if it's true.
Yep. It's actually true. Pictures are even worse. Anything I see on a reel, or I just don't believe it. Instagram, don't believe it. TikTok, don't believe it.
No, it's really, really scary. At the moment, a lot of those visuals are kind of, robotish, but they're getting better and better all the time.
Right, they are. Lucy Dalglish, you have taught and you have done journalism for a long time, and you've studied it even further back from before we were in it even. And I want to ask you, am I being hyperbolic when I say that I do not recall a time historically or in my experience where the media has been under such governmental pressure, censorship, attacks by the president, pressure to do business to the point where they're giving up, easy cases. The ABC and Paramount cases were easy to win from a lawyer's point of view, but they just caved. Can you recall another period like this where we seem to be in so much danger?
I can recall other periods where I felt things were unsettled and we were in really dangerous territory. But it was broader than just the media. There was, 1968. There was, Watergate. There were all of those things. But such an incredible broad brush threat against our established journalists and our trusted news organizations. No, there's never been anything like that. Well, okay.
Yeah, see, it's hard. As journalists, we're trained not to say never or the only time.
Well, I was just thinking about tomorrow's classroom, and I'm going to be talking about the Alien and Sedition Act.
Oh, that was a pretty
got passed by John Adams,
second president of the United States.
The president of the United States, second president of the United States, and he got the Alien and Sedition Act passed because he didn't want Thomas Jefferson to be president. And it basically punished you for all sorts of stuff. I've actually got the definition of sedition is conduct or speech inciting people to rebel against the authority of the state or monarch. And the Sedition Act made it a crime to publish false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States or either house of the Congress of the United States or the President of the United States. Now,
terrible law.
That was what, 1803? I mean, that was a long time ago, and it got overturned, and it was revoked in what, 1818 or something like that, long time ago. But that was an attempt by a president to behave like a monarch or an authoritarian or whatever. And it was just after we got started as a country. And the idea was to shut people up. And of course, that's what we're dealing with now. People are feeling threatened. I mean, I feel threatened. I don't know what I'm going to say to my class tomorrow when I go in and try to describe for them just the feelings I'm having about what's going on.
In my state, in New York, Lee Stefanik has proposed that all public teachers, K through 12 and college, be scrutinized for their remarks about Charlie Kirk and be held accountable if we, I guess, have not expressed our mournfulness in the correct way.
Well, that's the kind of thing that I'm sure is going on. And I think the atmosphere of each individual university or college it would be interesting as time goes on to look back and see who did what. But I am always, because I'm a trained journalist, I try never to go into the classroom and try to advocate one way or the other. I told my students at the beginning of this semester, when I saw some of this stuff starting to happen, I said, I hope that by the end of the semester, you're not going to really know what my political persuasion is, except, and I have been an advocate for the First Amendment since I can't even remember. Sixth grade was the first time I remember using my Sixth Amendment rights. And I told them, you will know, because I'm an advocate for journalism. So you will know my feelings regarding the First Amendment and who I think is abusing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I love to foster debate. I think it's wonderful, respectful, reasoned debate, or even unreasoned debate.
Mm-hmm. My position's a little riskier. I'm recorded, I've written, I'm an opinion journalist who is anti-Trump. And I can't hide that. I could try, but anybody could look it up in, one little Google search. So I tell my students that right off. And I said, I will not give you an F if you don't think the same way. In fact, I would welcome it because the debate and pushback is what this is all about. But you still have to worry about it in the atmosphere we have right now in both the press and in universities. It's very scary time. So let me ask this: what can the media do? What should the media be doing to fight back, to stop this, these incursions and this criticism?
Well, first of all, find people who are willing to speak out on these issues. Have them write, have them cover stories, inform the public. I wish more media would do more sort of self-help type stories. These are your rights. Here are the different ways you can use them. And for that, I mean, put in a plug. I'm a trustee at the Freedom Forum these days. And the freedomforum.org has a lot of information that's very easy to understand. And I wish the media would do more stories about, not about famous people talking, but stories about the rights of ordinary citizens to speak.
And Lucy Dalglish is a lawyer. She is a journalist. She's an educator. and we're talking about First Amendment rights in the press and speech rights under fire. What's the role of the public? I don't think they're separate, and you've begun to speak this way. They're not separate from what the press has to do.
No, not at all. The press has no more, no less than the same rights the public has. And I don't think the public really understands that a lot of the time.
Talk more about that. You are right. And we don't do a good job explaining it. Maybe it has to do with those self-help articles we don't write. Our traditional stance is that we're not the story. We stand out. We don't talk about ourselves. We don't write about fighting to get information. Freedom of information stories they were just not allowed in most of the places I ever worked at, because we were told the public doesn't care about that. If you have to work hard to get information, too bad, that's your job. I never agree with that.
In a lot of states, all the federal government and the state and all of the states have freedom of information laws. Mm-hmm. Citizens are able to go to public meetings. Citizens are able to get access to probably the majority of records that are kept by these government entities. We're trying to teach our young journalists as much as we can how to use this public information. On Thursday, my students are going to get their exercise on how to get some information that we hope that some of our students are going to use it for an investigative piece next semester. But anybody can request a public record. Anybody can go to a public meeting. Anyone can post their thoughts in print, online, as long as you don't print false statements about someone that defame them, as long as you're not engaging in obscenity, as long as you're not violating someone's copyright by plagiarizing, as long as it's not a threat or harassment. It's almost all speech in this country is public, or is you're able to say what you want. You're able to publish what you want. You are able to assemble. You are able to petition, and you're able to practice the religion of your choice.
Yes, you can. You also protest is one of the other First Amendment rights. I teach this too, and that also is under attack right now. There are laws being considered or have actually passed in various states that strictly limit what you can do, that put you in danger of going out and saying, I don't approve of this. Release the Epstein files, and you can be run over by a car, and some governors say they won't prosecute you for that.
Let's not talk about Texas, okay? I mean, it's just, and I shouldn't make light of it, because I don't think of it in a light-hearted manner. We learned here at the University of Maryland a year ago, when our university decided to cancel all protests or demonstrations or observances on our campus on October 7th, unless they were sponsored by the university. So student groups Jewish student groups, students supporting the Palestinian, the people in Gaza, they were all told they had to cancel their October 7th observances, and they called it a regular time, place, or manner restriction. Well, it wasn't, and a federal judge basically said no. And you know what? The university just had to settle with those students who were prohibited from protesting based on their viewpoint. The university just ended up paying them $100,000.
Oh, wow. That's a hopeful sign. I did not know that.
Yeah, that was just, they just settled that a couple of weeks ago, and they made an announcement about it. When it was going on, my students were coming to class all the time saying, can he do that? Can they do that? It was like, no, but let's just see what happens.
See what happens as a result of their doing it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, they were, the morning class came in and said, the judge said he was going to release that opinion today. And then the opinion was released, and the afternoon class came in and said, the judge released the opinion today. So it was sort of right is so on point with what we were talking about in class.
Oh, that rarely happens. That was, and they were excited to hear about it. That's interesting. I'm going to ask you one of those horrible, vague academic questions now.
Mm.
And here it is. It's we've been talking about this really in this whole chapter, but what is, in your viewpoint, the role of the press in a democracy? Trump has painted us as the opposition. I don't think that's correct, but maybe he's got a lot of mileage from that. Are we the
Yeah.
opposition or are we something different, Lucy?
We're definitely something different. Absolutely something different. The role of the media, all types of media, are to present at its core, to give citizens the information that we all need to make educated decisions at the ballot box. There are other reasons why a free press and free speech are important, but to me, that's just the core. You can't expect the public to go and make a good decision about who is going to be the leader of our society and our communities if we don't have access to information about who they are and what they stand for. And I have never met a journalist who didn't believe that in some way or another. That's why I became a journalist. I was curious about everything and I wanted to serve my community. And I thought that my community would be best served if I was out there gathering the information they might not have access to, so that we could all live together, hopefully, as close to peace and harmony as we can, but that society will grow and build, and it would foster a vibrant democracy. And I see that around the world kind of collapsing. And I just find it so hard to believe that citizens would not still value that right to make their own decisions about how we're all going to live together.
Well, I was concerned, and I saw that this past week when the Department of Defense Secretary has said he's going to limit access to the Pentagon. And in order to go in now to have access to the people who are making our military policy, and that is domestic policy now in many cases because our troops are in cities, they have to agree not to print certain information and not to use material until it's released by the secretary. Now that seems to me direct government censorship, and there was more of an outcry over Jimmy Kimmel than over this.
I think because it was easier to understand Jimmy Kimmel.
Right.
The Pentagon and who has a right to, get a press pass and get credentials to cover the military. And, that's a bit more complicated, but at its core, it's still government censorship. And one thing, I really believe it's going to backfire on them. Number one, somebody will be the test case. Somebody will publish something that they didn't explicitly authorize and get their press pass yanked. Then, whoever it is will sue. And I think a judge will kick it out. And when I say, I mean the restriction. But I think it's going to also backfire on the Pentagon. And I say this because of all the cases involving shield laws and reporters' privilege and sources, anonymous sources, and all of that. That place down there in Arlington is going to start leaking like a sieve. And news organizations are going to probably have somebody set up to go and cover the press conferences and everything. And then they're going to have a team of other reporters to talk to all these people in the Pentagon who want to talk. It's
That's very hopeful. Again, you are more optimistic than I am, and I'm hoping that's because you're much smarter and
oh,
experienced in these things. But I watched the AP, which was censored. They were
right.
kicked out of the White House because they wouldn't say Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico. You remember that.
Yeah.
And the courts were not friendly to that. They ended up ruling that it was up to the White House, not up to the press corps, who got entry, who was allowed to come in. We did not win that battle.
Well, yes. I mean, I'm more concerned about the other aspect of that, where all of a sudden they've taken control of who's in the press pool, in the White House Correspondents' Press Pool. The AP, they just twisted themselves like a pretzel to go after the AP. And what they
Yeah,
did
yeah, you're
was,
right.
okay, we can't focus just on the AP, so we're just going to say that we will no longer guarantee that a wire service reporter will be in the daily pool, which is, from their standpoint, I mean, it's a ridiculous thing for them to do. But my understanding from talking to people there is there's what's out there as to what they're doing and then what's really happening. And I've never been a White House correspondent, but things, they all have to kind of get along a little bit. And there are times when you're going to want to use the media or get information out to the media. So you have to come to some sort of accommodations. And in the end, what the court said was only the places that are ultra restricted, that the president gets to decide who comes into his office and who gets on his airplane.
Right.
And that did backtrack it a little bit.
It's interesting because, again, we are in a situation different from previous times where, yes, the government did need the New York Times and the Washington Post to be there. That worked both ways. But now they're letting in ONA, all these alternative news,
Right.
And very friendly alternative news sources, who ask puffball questions, don't print any criticism. So is that still there anymore? I'm not so sure that it is. That I don't believe that Donald Trump thinks he needs. He sort of likes the New York Times and the Washington Post, but
Oh
I'm
yeah,
not sure he needs them anymore. Yeah.
there's there's what the public persona is and what they say, and that versus sometimes what they actually do.
Mhm.
And what they're doing to the networks is dead serious. The lawsuit, the threats against CBS, the lawsuits against ABC and the New York Times, he's just picking them off in different ways. That's not, they're just picking opportunities, and it's, what can we do to this particular type of news organization? What can we do to those folks over there? I'm waiting for them to do something to NBC. They've kind of been ignoring NBC a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if they have any mergers or business deals in the work that gives them a weak spot. We are fast running out of time, but I have a last question for Lucy Dalglish, my very distinguished guest, an expert in journalism and in the law. And that's look into your crystal ball, Lucy, and tell me what you see over the next, for the media, over the next, say, 5 years. Trump is likely to be in office for most, if not all of that time, depending on what he does, firmly in charge of the FCC, has a friendly Supreme Court that's not happy with the media either. The media is in sad financial shape as a whole.
Yeah.
What do you see? You're optimistic. Do a number on that. Tell me I should not be thinking we're doomed.
There is a little bit of reason to be optimistic, mainly because you and I are both in the classroom a lot, and we see these students and we see how charged up they are and how wicked smart they are. So that makes me optimistic. But I have to tell you, I've never spent so much time asking the question you just asked of myself. Like, what do I see? What do I see? And I keep thinking, oh, dear Lord, I hope the American public understands what they would lose. There are reasons why, let's talk about the conservative versus liberal pushing back and forth and the viewpoint wars and all of that. But the media stuff, I'm scared. I really am. And I guess maybe I'm really, really naive in thinking that at some point, even conservative members of Congress will start pushing back. And I know from talking to some judges, federal judges, over the summer, I was privileged to speak to a number of them at a program. They definitely understand what's going on. Even the ones who were appointed by Trump, they get it. And I'm scared about the media. They are very, very frightened about the rule of law.
Yeah.
And
they're related. They're related.
They are very, very much related. So I know that they understand that. And there are certain people in our society, I think, we're going to have a lot of responsibility for holding it all together in the near future.
Yeah. So you're talking about two pillars of democracy that are shaky, that are getting kicked repeatedly by this administration.
Well, I'll tell you, my dad just turned 90, and I was visiting over the weekend in North Dakota. Had a wonderful visit with him and everything. And my dad, Mr. Staunch North Dakota Republican, is really, really upset about what he sees going on. He voted for Trump the first time because he didn't really I don't think even thought about it much. But he said to me the other day, we were driving, and he said, it's those federal judges that are going to save our butts. And I never thought I would ever hear him say anything like that. He said, they're holding the country together. And I have a lot of admiration for a lot of them. My parents, my mother actually, she's also that age, and she has started to cry a few times when I've talked to her.
Over the condition of
yeah, she said, I'm so worried about my children and my grandchildren.
Wow.
What's the world going to be like?
Wow. We have run out of time. I don't like ending on a dreary note, but I think it's kind of justified. Our traditional ending is a toast. I have a glass of wine over here, just out of sight. And my toast for tonight is a dual one, to the judges and to the founding fathers. A hope that the judges hold the line, as they seem to have been doing, and can get through to the Supreme Court. And a thanks to the founding fathers who set up a really good system, if we could only get it back on track.